All right, Nelson, what's up? Nelson Baker, Rochelle High School. How's it going?
Man, it's going well. I'm happy to be back on. Just to talk, Rochelle wrestling, Northern Illinois wrestling, Olympic wrestling, college wrestling, man, all of the above. It's been super, super fun. Especially this year to, get to know you. We talked on the pod. We've talked a handful of times at tournaments and duels and, text back and forth. And it's really cool to get to, meet somebody that I think I see eye to eye on a lot of things wrestling. And, I listen as much as I can to the pod and hear your takes on a lot of different things. And it's really cool. I feel like people that are really, really dialed into wrestling are hard to come by, especially that are young guys in the area. So it's just been fun. So I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. That's good to hear. And I think the hardest thing for me for over the last couple of years, right, is we spend so much time in the wrestling room or competing that we spend less and less time communicating with one another, catching up, having hard conversations, having, the easy conversations too, just catching up, trying to work our thoughts out and stuff like that. And so, I'm glad that I've had this just so that I can kind of like collectively bring a conversation to to the community of wrestling people, that's for sure. So yeah, likewise, it's been good to catch up with you.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, tell me about how the season has been. I mean, last we saw each other was at the Rockford East tournament where you guys got second, I believe,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
And then this weekend you just got back from the Flavin. But how was that, and how has the season been in between that?
Yeah, it's been going really well. I think since the last time we talked on the podcast, a lot has happened. We had an athlete in Tommy Trudeau that committed to a Division III college program in UW Eau Claire, so we're excited about that. We've had a ton of duels. Like you referenced, we went to the Flavin. We were at the Rockford East tournament. We've got Sycamore this upcoming weekend, and the thing that has really been awesome this year is that our guys have kind of come to the agreement that we want the smoke, right? So like the last couple years, we've had a really heavy 1A/2A schedule, which is great. I think it's cool. I think we've got a strong sense of community and wrestling in this area. And I was a 1A guy, and I really liked wrestling those 1A, 2A schools, but we've got some athletes and a team that I think really could get pushed. And not that 1A and 2A teams, can't push us. I mean, there are certainly 1A and 2A teams that are going to beat us. But we've in the last couple of weeks, we've wrestled Prospect and Naperville Central and York and Barrington and Stevenson and Manuka and Moline. Some schools that are 3, 4, 5 times our size, and we've taken quite a bit of losses. I mean, we've won a lot of duels, we've lost a lot of duels. I don't even know what our duel record is off the top of my head, but our team is better because of it. And guys aren't shying away from tough matches. We've got guys asking us to bump up to wrestle the toughest guys in the state. I'll call out Caden Morris. We were wrestling Hinsdale Central, second round at the Flavin, and he wanted to bump up to wrestle the second ranked heavyweight in 3A, and he went up and he got beat, but, he came off the mat and shook his head and understood that that was the possibility of bumping up. And, it's hard to get kids to see that because that's not even something that I saw as a high school athlete. It's hard to get a kid to understand that wrestling a guy that could and maybe should beat you is better overall than going and piss pounding, the guys over there that you can go and beat with your eyes closed. It was always easier for me to go, I want to go to this place where I can pin and tech fall everybody. I don't want to go wrestle Josh Albert. That's not going to be very fun. But, at the end of the day, being an adult, I understand that. And being a college wrestler for 4 or 5 years, I understand that. But my athletes now are starting to get that. So it's really, really cool. And the wins and losses are whatever. It's great at the end of the year to be putting the hurt on guys, but this part of the season is to go and find the best competition possible. And you listen to the coaches of St. Charles East and Marmion and Marist and JCA, they've got that same mindset, but in order for them to find that competition, they've got to go all over the country. They're going to the Ironman, they're going out and wrestling Clovis, they're going out and wrestling people all over the country. We're fortunate enough that to find that level of competition for us, we just got to go 45 minutes east and we find it. So it's been
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, it's good, and to hear that you got guys that want to bump up and go after people. I think, the hardest thing to teach people is that you're only as good as your competition,
Yeah.
and to not put yourself in the battle. Like the battle makes us better. And I think, like you said, after you get through college and you get through, having a camaraderie of people who, you're fighting each other every day, you start to really realize that someone who brings the best out of you is always going to be the one that you really want to find, because
Mhm.
yeah, it just makes you better. I talk about this a lot recently because I'm trying to communicate what I'm trying to build, but what I'm really trying to build is a performance community, right? A community of people that push each other to perform at a high level, to bring the best out of ourselves. And the podcast, the highlights, the results, that's really an effort to kind of motivate each other to put out the best product, to try to teach these kids how to win and compete hard and look for those fights to make them better. So yeah, I mean, you guys have a good culture down there, a good group of coaches, so it wouldn't take long before some kids start to get it from you guys, and start going after people. So that's good to hear. Yeah, so with that being said, you guys went out to the Flavin.
Mhm.
You're going to go to Sycamore. That's cool.
Yep.
I definitely have plans to be out there to watch the competition there. So what do you think? What's the next stretch of competition? Obviously, Sycamore is a tough tournament. It's a pool tournament, so you wrestle a pool and then you find out if you're in the championship bracket or stuff like that. But after that, you guys don't have a conference tournament. So this next month, how many duels do you have tournament wise, and how do you look at getting ready for the end of the season?
Yeah, the bulk of our duels, I think, are in the books. I think we still got a couple of conference duels left. We've got a Sycamore duel after the Sycamore tournament this weekend, so we go Sycamore tournament and then we wrestle Sycamore. But this is kind of our stretch of, I would say, like high level two-way competition. We start off the year with a whole bunch of duels. A lot of those teams of which are 1A or smaller two-way schools. We got the Dixons, we got the Lee Winds, we got the Stillman Valleys, we got the Rock Falls, Erie Prophetstown, and then we hit, like I just referenced, that tough 3A section. And now we've got the Sycamore tournament, we've got the Sycamore duel. We go down to the Muhammad Seymour Invitational, which is another pool bracket tournament.
Yep.
And that's really good because we get to see teams like Muhammad Seymour. We get to see teams like Mattoon. There are teams from Wisconsin. There are teams from Missouri. But it's a really good look at the other top level two-way teams down south that we wouldn't otherwise get a chance to see. So that's, really the part of the season where we as coaches are starting to assess what individual wrestlers need in order to get through those regionals and sectional brackets, to give themselves a shot down in Champaign. I always get excited during this part of the season because even though it's the grindy part, the weather's starting to get cold, the competitions are stacking up and kids have made weight a whole bunch of times. It's really fun to see, as Rob Sherrill does his rankings and he breaks it down by sectional, you start to figure out, okay, who's getting down at what weight? What is our sectional going to look like? Does it look like we're, solidly in that top four? Does it look like we're right on the cusp? Does it look like we need to maybe, get a couple individual workouts with a kid to close that gap, with some specific techniques to get them that ticket down to Champaign? So this is where I feel like with the coaching staff that we have at Rochelle, this is where we have a real advantage, having so many guys that have done that, plus so many guys that can look at a situation and a wrestler and assess what they need in order to finish the season out strong. And it's kind of a more, building up process than it is a tearing down. We just got done with about 3 weeks of tearing us down, and now it's time to start building us up. So other than that, I mean, I think, like I said, maybe 2 or 3 duels, but then just a lot of time to work. We've
Yeah.
specifically scheduled now without a conference tournament. We thought about filling in with another tournament that we could find or a couple duels that we could find to fill that void. But we've just decided like we'd rather get in the practice room for 6 days in a row. Let's practice Monday through Friday, and then on Saturday let's get another practice in since we don't have that tournament, and let's really work on our skill set and our guys.
Yeah, I like that perspective, and I think that you guys are going to be all right with that because I think, like you said, this if you gotten to this point without too many injuries,
Mhm.
you basically you throw everything at them, you get them in shape, you get them in competition mode, and now you just work out the kinks and get them ready for for the state run.
Yeah.
So I think you guys have a good plan. So that's cool. Looking forward to that because you guys have a good opportunity to really to well, you have a really good opportunity to make it down to the state tournament and look at trying to get a trophy. So I'm excited to see if you guys can come through and do that. And the competition of or the the effort of trying is going to be fun to watch too because you guys have a good group that looks like they compete hard
Mhm.
and yeah, so that should be exciting.
Yeah, it's fun. The postseason is always, I've only been a coach for 6, now 7 years, um, after college, but I always stressed so much about the end of the year. I stressed so much about the end of the year. What's our regional? What's our sectional going to look like? Do we think we can make it downstate? And at the end of the day, it's up to the kids, and you work as hard as you can with the kids. And if the kids succeed individually, then that's awesome for them. And if enough kids succeed individually, then the team stuff will fall into place. The thing that we can't control is, who gets put in our regional, or if we win that regional, who we have to wrestle at sectionals, or if we somehow make it out of sectionals, who we're going to wrestle at state. That's out of our control. So the time spent stressing about that is just nothing but stress. So you just have faith that the kids want it and the kids have worked as hard as they can work, and everything will fall into place, or it won't. And then, you do as much as you can
Oh,
to
yeah.
right those wrongs and wrestle as much as you can in the spring and summer and fall, and you do it all over again.
Yeah, wherever you fall is exactly where you're meant to be,
Yeah.
and you'll figure out the next steps from there.
Mhm.
Yeah. Side note, I saw it now. Is this a new piece of information? You're having a child?
Yes, we had talked yesterday on the phone, and I think right after that, my wife had posted a thing on Facebook. So yeah, we were super excited to announce that we're due for a baby in July. Don't know the gender yet. Hopefully, we find a cool way wrestling related to announce
Yeah,
that and
yeah.
figure that out. But
Yeah,
yeah,
you
that'll
seem like a big enough wrestling nut. You'll do one of those.
yeah.
I mean, personally, I'm gonna avoid that, but you seem like the type of guy that would do some fun stuff like that.
Yeah, man.
Um,
So it's excited. I think that too will certainly give me a different perspective on wrestling because up until this point, I've been working with everybody else's kids, and I've seen some people be able to manage. This is assuming my kid wants to wrestle. I have a hard time believing that my kid won't just want to wrestle because of the energy and environment they're going to be put in. But, if a child eventually ends up wrestling, I've seen a lot of people manage the dad and coach thing well. And I've also seen a lot of people manage it horribly and it ruined relationships. So I'm excited to, lean on my dad and lean on the coaches around me and lean on the coaches that I had to help, work with that situation. And, you know, it's
yeah.
a whole different wrinkle of wrestling. So
Yeah, yeah. Well, good luck with that.
thank you.
Congrats. And yeah, so what else you've been following much college wrestling?
Man, I follow college wrestling like it's, my entire news feed. I think what's going on, I'm a little guy, so I play close attention to 125 and 133. And this year I've had just the most fun following 125 with how chaotic it is. There is nobody that has gone in and grabbed it and asserted themselves as number one or the dominant, fish in the pond. So it's going to be really exciting to see what happens as we hit the Big Ten schedule, as well as the conference championships, and then obviously Division 1 championships are going to be super, super fun to watch at those lightweights, especially 125. And, all the drama with the Ferrari brothers that are seemingly covering up a lot of the wrestling and the good wrestling that happened at the Iowa Soldier Salute. It's fun to watch. And it's also fun to, look at social media and see what people are talking about, like with that whole Ferrari situation. Like, are the Brands brothers still interested in bringing them on board? What do the athletes think about that? What do the Ferrari brothers think about that? It's
Yeah.
just crazy.
Well, just to talk about the 125 bracket, I'm a light guy too, and
Mhm.
somebody who I've developed a friendship with is Eric Barnett from
Mhm.
Wisconsin, and yeah, I'm actually excited about that because I think the national tournament's going to be really wide open as far as just openings for somebody to get in there. Obviously, last year we thought it wasn't going to be open. We thought
Mhm.
Spencer Lee was going to kind of walk through it, and he ended up not. So obviously the NCAA tournament is always chaotic like that. But yeah, I'm with you. I think this this season that there's a lot of unknowns as far as who's going to come out on top, and obviously the same goes for a lot of different weight classes. I think the parity in college wrestling right now this year is pretty good, except for a couple weight classes seem to be wrapped up by Penn State guys.
Yep.
But obviously time will tell whether or not that that holds true. But yeah, and then the other stuff, I think I'm curious about the relationship between what we do in a local setting as far as how most of the kids that you coach at Rochelle are not going to wrestle at the college level.
Hmm.
Most of the kids in the area are not going to wrestle at the college level or at least at the Division I national level. And so I struggle with the idea as to bringing the attention around the chaos, the spectacle aspect
Hmm.
of the sport. Just knowing that I love the battle, I love uh, the elite competition. I don't like some of the tactics that people are using to bring attention to themselves or to, the maybe the sport in general or
Hmm.
whatever. But yeah, I'm still wrestling with how I feel about it, and it doesn't really matter how I feel. I think the collective has to decide how they feel about it. Um, but I do think that it is an interesting thing because what I love about high school wrestling is it gives people an opportunity to get their energy out. It allows young men to deal with emotions that without wrestling. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday. I said it's not to use a word that is a silly political word, but it's a safe space for fighting,
Hmm.
right? Like if you fight on the street, you get arrested, you could die, you could break something, a lot of stuff.
Hmm.
But it's a real safe environment for people to fight each other, and I think that's important for people, specifically young men, to get it out. I know I needed it, and it helped me kind of like calm myself. You
Yeah.
got a whole bunch of energy and stuff, and obviously if you have a brother, but I couldn't fight my brother because it would end up real bad.
Yeah.
Like we wouldn't stop until somebody was bleeding or something. But yeah, so I'm still wrestling with that whole concept of because obviously I'm older now, so when I was younger, I probably would have got fired up. I was fired up all the time when I was
Yeah.
younger, um, but just trying to navigate how you communicate to young people that it's not fully about this spectacle.
Hmm.
But yeah, I mean, obviously college wrestling has a lot more to offer. I think the internet just kind of highlights some of that stuff. Um,
Yeah.
so
It,
yeah,
it's what gets clicks, and it's obviously what the Flow Wrestlings and the different people are going to cover, because that's obviously what's in it for them is they got to make money, they got to get ad revenue, they got to get the most clicks. And I think a thing that some people know about me and other people don't is that I'm like as big of an MMA fan as you could possibly be. I had a buddy and I that did a podcast for a couple years that kind of petered out and stuff, but I think it's interesting to see the dynamics of how what the WWE was doing with their personalities and their promotion and their trash talking and all that stuff. You can obviously see how that has bled into MMA with promotion, with characters like Sean Strickland and Colby Covington and all the different people, Sean O'Malley, those different people. And that's obviously how you promote yourself. And we're starting to see, especially with the NIL deals, the way to get eyes on you is to kind of ham it up and almost have a character. And whether you like that character or not, it's probably undeniable that that's what gets you the most money and attention. Now, I am certainly not a huge fan of the character, or maybe it is truly how, the Ferrari brothers carry themselves. But there is one thing that's undeniable, and it's that people are talking about the Ferrari brothers and their prospective futures at which colleges and different things. So, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I think NIL overall is good for athletes, but it also then opens the door for, whatever tactics you're going to make to get the biggest NIL deals, then, start to go away from what wrestling maybe is what I feel supposed to be. And it's not for the money or the flashiness or all that stuff. It's about, being a good person and overcoming adversity and, having faith in yourself and those different types of things. But again, you take what you get. Beggars can't be choosers. We can't want more opportunities for athletes and more money and different things without then kind of inviting some of this stuff into what we know and love and introducing a new aspect of wrestling. So we'll
yeah,
see.
yeah. I think that was said well. And the only thing I would say on top of it is, oftentimes, um, it's what we're, the masses are deciding what is
Yes.
interesting.
Hmm.
So all you can do is put out what you want, and if the culture continues to grow like that, I think, again, in certain cultures like, Japanese culture, some Eastern cultures that uh they have a belief in how things are a certain way, maybe more philosophical martial arts component. They're less likely to fall into bringing about this. They would talk less about it. So I definitely think that you said it well. So yeah, but anything else going on? Are you excited about just in general, the I mean, yeah, I guess, where are you at with your coaching perspective, and Rochelle, and you've been there for how many years now?
This is my fourth year here at Rochelle.
Yeah, and so are you guys on, like, when you guys got together and kind of like participated in the start of it,
Hmm.
did you guys have a plan and a trajectory, and are you meeting some of those goals, and
Um, to be honest, as much as we goal set individually, we're kind of just like pouring everything in. And we got Bruno and I were the ones. Bruno was there for a year and a half before I got there. And then during COVID, then I got a job there, and we stacked on Tyler before we had got started because I had a personal relationship with him. And we just got Hank Swallow, who wrestled for 5 years at Iowa State, involved. We have another coach, Chris Hager, and we just we try to do what we think is best. There are things that we've seen done and things that we've understood for a really long time that a lot of the kids that we're coaching were never taught and they don't understand. So just imparting those things, and it's just shot upwards extremely fast. And I think one thing that has really, really helped us is just getting kids wrestling in the off season. Freestyling Greco is something that is freestyling Greco and Illinois wrestling in general with ILUSA and Fargo and duels and all those things is almost equally as important to me as Rochelle wrestling is. So when the high school season ends and we start that stuff, it is so, so incredibly satisfying to work with those kids that want to work after the season, as well as, not only the kids from Rochelle, but, we go over to DeKalb a lot, work at Hurricane, working with the Jimmies and working with the Cassiopes and working with all the DeKalb kids and the area kids that are studs. And then going on and coaching the 16U duels that are, fortunately enough, we're in Rockford these past 2 years. We're flying out to Utah now for the next 2 years, but then getting on with Fargo and all those things. Like, I think the best thing that I was ever told as far as how to build a program is just that your athletes will match the coach's energy. So as long as you put in that energy and you show them how much you care and you give them a good example as to how a healthy relationship with wrestling should be, like, you just start stacking people on board and getting on with the mission. And whether they've been wrestling their whole lives or just wrestling for, a few weeks or never ever, there's so many people that can align with the mindset of a few influential people. So it's really cool to see not only our wrestlers rising to that level, but just the area wrestlers in general, as well as the wrestlers that I get to work with, all the way down from like Edwardsville and the Carbondale area. It's just super cool that, and I feel like the Northern Illinois wrestling scene is like a year or 2 years away from that brink of like exponential growth in the sport of wrestling. I feel like for some reason, and maybe this is just a generational thing of I went away when, I went from high school here to then college in Wisconsin, and maybe I just wasn't keeping up with the news and the wrestlers. But when I got back here during COVID, it just didn't feel like it felt when I was in high school. But over the last 4 or 5 years, it started to really feel like the interest in wrestling is surging. And maybe that has something to do with COVID and, the lack of opportunities. But now I feel like more of us are starting to collaborate. Different clubs are working together. Different teams want to intermingle and work in the off season. It's just really, really cool. And I'm now on a tangent. I can't even remember what the question you asked me was, but it's just super,
yeah.
super cool to see, whether we had goals or not, we're in a great spot, not only from a Rochelle perspective, but a Northern Illinois perspective, as well as a statewide perspective as well.
Yeah, no, you answered that well. Um, yeah, I would agree. I think that things are, and I think it's a mixture of a lot of things. Obviously, it's always easy to think like, oh, it was better
Yeah.
back in my day. Um, but I do think that there's some truth to some of that stuff. Obviously, you know. certain programs like Hananiga were down for a number of years, and now they're kind of coming back.
Mhm.
Um, and there's still some disruption going on, right? Some programs are losing kids because of multiple reasons. And so there's still a lot of work to be done, but I do think that uh, you're right in a lot of ways that there are things to look forward to. I know I'm optimistic about that as well. So yeah, I think in a couple of years, there's a real big opportunity, and yeah. So the last thing I'll ask you is like just being a coach. I think this is always important to start talking about. Um, but what are the things that maybe you want to change or talk about changing or start conversation around um, changing anything to the structure of the season, dual meets, how you guys run your whole year?
Man, I have some hot takes of what I would like to see from a high school perspective and a college perspective, and they will never happen. Like this is just I talk to anybody that will listen to me about these types of things, but one thing that I really feel passionate about is just the mindset of what the goal of wrestling should be. We had talked about how very few kids, from Rochelle and Northern Illinois and the state of Illinois are going to wrestle at a Division 1 college wrestler, right? Or wrestling. And I think all too often coaches sometimes see that as like the ultimate goal, right? Like you would love, love, love no more than to get your hands on an athlete, for them to have success, for them to work hard, to build a great relationship with them, for them to go to a D1 college and for them to have success. And by all means, that is super awesome. And then secondary to that, I think most people think that getting a wrestler to college, whether it's Division 2, NAIA, Division 3, JUCO, things like that, that's also really cool. And undeniably, that is cool. For me, the thing that is like the crowning achievement of coaching a wrestler is a kid that works hard, gets the positive aspects out of the sport, and then wants to continue that sport in some way, shape, or form. And for most kids, that's not college wrestling. But for a lot of kids, that could be, deciding to coach wrestling later on in their lives, whether it's at a club level, whether it's at a high school level, whether it's in an off-season individualized level. Having a kid go through their wrestling career and thinking, man, that was something that impacted me so much, I want to give back to that sport. Like that's what makes me smile the most, right? If I could handpick uh, a path for one of my wrestlers to take, it would be to do exactly what I'm doing. Not only because we need better, role models and adults and people that love the sport in order to keep this whole thing going, but it also then is reinforcing that we as coaches are doing the right thing. So I just feel like there needs to be, especially at the highest of levels of high school coaching. And again, obviously, you're going to have those kids that go on and perform and, are wrestling at the highest of levels, but just making sure that you're emphasizing how important giving back to the sport is super, super cool. We have a system in place at Rochelle where two wrestlers have to stay after practice every day and give back to the kids club. Whether it's our white group or our purple group, we've got kids that, are raising their hands and volunteering to go ref little kids matches or go stick around for practice to help teach high crotches or front headlocks. And that's what really makes me smile is it's not a chore to get those kids to stay after. They want to do that. And hopefully they will grow up to be wrestling coaches in whatever communities they go into and realize the importance of that.
So you started that by saying this will never happen.
Oh, my other take is what would never happen.
Well, okay, so you
Yeah.
tell me your other take
Yes.
because obviously I was kind of confused for a second. I'm like, not only is this going to happen
Yes.
with coaches like yourself coaching young people, I personally, like we've talked about before, like I want to have a facility where
Yes.
when you're done with high school, you can come and work out and train, whether it's jujitsu or wrestling related stuff. I think
Yes.
the martial arts journey is 100% the true essence of of the wrestling journey to me. Like I think just getting on the mat, getting your energy out, sweating, learning how to master your body as well as your mind, as well as like the physical technical sport of
Mhm.
the wrestling. I think that is the fruit of the labor. I think all the awards, all
Yeah.
my awards are in my closet collecting dust or in my parent's basement. Like
Yep.
the awards are all fleeting. Everything that you accomplish will go away. People will forget your name. But the only thing that really is left over is your relationship to the activity. And yeah, I agree. I agree with you,
Right.
and I do think that that people will continue to do that as long as we have coaches and mentors that truly love that aspect of it. I've been pushing a lot of coaches that I see who were wrestlers who don't wrestle right now. Get your shoes out, wrestle. Don't start a practice with an hour session. Start with 10 minutes, then go to 20 minutes, and then really start to fall back in love with this activity of getting a sweat in and learning how to use your body. And I think that that's the most important thing. So
Mhm.
I'm glad to hear you.
Yeah.
So now you go to the hot
Now I
take.
go to my hot take. That previous one was a take that I think everyone can get on board with. This one,
Yeah.
and if we had a little like freestyling Greco ticker right here, I mention it a lot, and it's something that changed my wrestling career. I mean, 180 degrees. It taught me body awareness. It taught me all these different things. But we're obviously very successful as a country on the freestyle stage and struggle greatly from a Greco-Roman perspective. So I always sit and stew, and I am a Greco-Roman wrestling nut. Like, I don't coach hardly any freestyle at practices. I mean, I am at the tournaments and stuff, but I am a Greco-Roman guy. Wrestle at the US Open, wrestle at university trials, wrestle at U23s, coach for the dual team, coach at Fargo. That's all only Greco for me. So I try and try and try and figure out what the problem is with how Greco is struggling so much when we have so much talent and so many resources. And what I would love to see that will never ever happen is a reduction to the length of the folk style season across all platforms, right? Regardless of whether it's kids club, whether it's high school, whether it's NCAA. I mean, from an NCAA perspective, the wrestling season is so long. It is such a grind. And I am an advocate for year round wrestling. It's not that I think we need time off from wrestling, but what I would love to see is a folk style championships somewhere around the Christmas time, right? Whether that's before Christmas, whether that's right after Christmas. We start the season, we have a shortened, more condensed season and have a folk style championships. And then after Christmas or after first semester in college wrestling, then you have to choose a style, right? You either choose you're a Greco-Roman wrestler or you are a freestyle wrestler. And then around March, then you have the national championships of the two Olympic styles. And I think that would get people more exposed to those Olympic styles. The highest level of kids, obviously in high school, understand what freestyle and Greco is, but high school kids on average have no idea what these things are. And it's only the top maybe 15 or 10% of wrestlers that continue on and go do this, especially from a Greco perspective. A lot of people gravitate towards freestyle because they more understand the rule set and they more understand those positions. But if you had a kid that just decided to wrestle Greco the second half of each season, then you start developing a love for that. Coaches start getting better at coaching Greco. A lot of the coaches don't know any Greco-Roman positions or any Greco-Roman lifts or throws or, head ties or arm throws, different things like that. And I think if we could get more Division I level kids going down that Greco-Roman path, I think we might start to see some more success on the international level. And
So,
obviously, I don't think that would ever happen. I think people in America love folk style so much that they're unwilling to kind of give up that grind and that passion that they all have for it. But I am a unique individual and would
well, I would
really
say
like.
my question is, what do you like about Greco-Roman that you don't get from freestyle Greco
Man,
or
for me,
freestyle or folk style?
for me, I was always a wrestler that loved to throw nuclear missiles at you, right? I was not what you would consider a conventional wrestler. I love headlocks. I love big throws. I like getting to the body. I like moves that are extremely dangerous. And I didn't have that until I was exposed to Greco,
But
right?
technically, you can still hit those in freestyle and folk style.
Absolutely. But it just gives almost like you said, like a safe space to try some of those things,
Yeah.
right? Like in a Greco-Roman match, like it almost seems more like a game to me. I never
So
felt
you,
like.
so really, what is attractive to you is the fact that it took that game in
Mhm.
order for you to play in those positions.
Of course, right? In a
Yeah.
Greco-Roman match, it's an understood, especially from a domestic level and especially at a high school level. that it's an understood that you guys are going to lock horns and somebody's going to launch somebody. When you get to the world championship level and the Olympic level, like Greco gets a bad rep because those guys are so good that it almost looks like a 6 minute
Well, so
stalemate.
well, I have some ideas. Well, first, I wanted to make sure and ask you these questions
Yeah.
before. So with your coaching now, do
Mhm.
you ever like during folk style season
Mhm.
say, hey, here are the rule sets. You can't touch the legs because one thing in college we had this. We would always do this hand fighting drill. And in the hand fighting drill, the only way that you could score was their hands hit the mat, double underhooks, or snatch single.
Mhm.
Right. So you couldn't hit your knee. You
Yep.
weren't allowed to hit your knee. So there was just drills that we would have that were, basically games that had limiting, rule sets that
Mhm.
made you limited on what you do. So do you ever have games where you tell kids that they have to do, upper body positioning, stuff like that?
Yep, we do. I mean, basic stuff. We do like sumo drills. I think, most people have done some form of sumo where, a step out's a point, touching their hands is a point, right?
Yeah.
Lock around the body is a point, certain things like that. But we've got about 4 or 5 athletes that have really bought into Greco-Roman and they just identify as Greco-Roman athletes. I mean, Caden Morris throws a whole bunch of bombs. Tommy Trudeau has thrown a whole bunch of bombs. Xavier Villalobos, even though he's a slick guy that attacks ankles a lot, he was on our U16 national dual team and, took fourth at Northern Plains. He's a great Greco guy too. And so me and those kids are asking to stay after practice just to wrestle Greco, so we'll go
Yeah.
15, 20 minutes of just, hard Greco hand fighting or, 10 minutes of just lifts and lift defense and we're bombing each other and it's super fun. And other kids now are starting to be like, whoa, what are those guys doing over there?
Yeah.
Right. Because, you got this weird stance where you're kind of just bent over and you're not protecting your legs. And the interest is mounting and mounting and mounting. And it's not hard to make that sell when you see those guys on the mat who are doing these things, bombing
Yeah.
everybody and,
Well, I got two things. So
yeah.
one, I actually think that your assumption is wrong. I think stuff like that will actually be possible in the
Mhm.
future, only because I think that it with time and the growth of involvement, there will be more competitions.
Mhm.
And with more competitions, more freedom of people to make new competitions. So then you'll start to see, I think you'll start to see a diversity of types of competitions. Right now you already see, like say for instance, somebody wanted to do instead of Greco, they wanted to
Mhm.
do jujitsu or grappling.
Yeah.
You could go to a jujitsu or grappling event in December or January or whatever. So you
Yeah.
can already start to tweak your involvement with different styles of grappling at this moment. I just think, with time, you might start to see more variations in particular Greco, right? Like you're going to start to see more freestyle events throughout the year just
Mhm.
because there are more schools that are prep schools that are just dedicating, strictly to freestyle.
Yeah.
The other thing I was going to say is, I my teammate in college at Elmhurst is Joe Rao,
Yep.
and I watched Joe Rao wrestle, and I was so annoyed, like so annoyed with Greco because it's almost it's almost a bad thing to be up in the match because if you're up in the match, then they put you down
Yep.
and then you get turned. It's like, well, why would I do any work to put myself in a position where you're going to put me down? Because if you're up, like he was dominating the finals
Mhm.
match, and they just said, "All right, well now you're down." It's like,
Yep.
and my experience with that was, this is one of the reasons why I didn't like freestyle Greco because
Mhm.
back in the day, um, freestyle was like that too. Even if you were winning, they would put you down.
Yep.
And I remember at Fargo, the only time I ever went, I was beating a kid, Jamal Parks, who wrestled at Oklahoma State,
Mhm.
and a kid, Kyle Anson, who was a Iowa City High kid, and I was beating them both in takedowns. And they put me down, and then they teched me in guts, and
Uh-huh.
I was like, this is dumb. I was winning in takedowns, So
Yeah.
in Greco, though, that situation happened, and I'm like, this is such a deterrence to even be aggressive in the beginning of the match because it turned out to put him in a disadvantaged position.
Yeah, and I don't want my love for Greco to be confused as a love for the ever-changing rule set. I think the
Yeah,
rules of Greco change so much, and like I said, at that highest level, the the level of those guys are so high that it seems boring, like nobody can do anything because they're so
yeah,
good. And a lot of the changes come to just force offense, right? They want Greco to be this high flying exciting style, which on the high school level, it really is. But I think some of the rules that they've enacted in order to
Yeah.
force those things don't necessarily coincide with what's best for the athlete. They're trying to get viewership up, and nobody wants to watch a 1-0, 1-1 match.
Yeah.
They'd rather see somebody get put
Well,
down and lifted and sky bombed, and which I like
yeah,
watching too.
sure. But again, this is one of the things that I'm very vocal on as far as much as I can. But
Mhm.
like, I think that we are doing a disservice. Like, I think we're doing a disservice when we think that we're supposed to appease a person who doesn't understand the sport. Like, what if, like you said, what if we do a better job of getting people to really appreciate the craft and the martial
Mhm.
art itself? Like, I watched Joe Rao wrestle, and even though the score was tight or whatever, I didn't care. I was watching it because I understand that hand fight. I understand how hard it is to jostle for position
Mhm.
with those ties. So I'm appreciating it from a technical perspective at all times.
Yep.
And I feel like sometimes we're trying to appease the wrong people instead of just growing a community of people who understand technical components of wrestling, and then you can appreciate close matches. I don't get mad if it's a close match. I don't say, why don't we see any takedowns? Or I don't get mad if a guy rides somebody out. I'm like, did you see how hard he rode that guy? Like, that guy's not a baby. Like, that
Yeah.
guy's a strong, tough dude, and he got ridden out. Like, that's impressive,
Uh-huh.
right? Like, I always think impressive as opposed to, oh, that guy's no good, or I'm not excited, because again, selling tickets to people who have never sweat on the mat before is not something that I'm very interested in doing.
I would agree wholeheartedly with that. I think before we can start to appease the fans, we need to sell wrestlers on why Greco is beneficial,
Yeah.
and the wrestlers are the ones that need to jump on board before fans are ever going to jump on board. So as cool as the big highlights are, I would agree with you. I think we need to make it's something that's sustainable before we pitch it to the masses. And the
Yeah.
wrestlers, like you said, are going to appreciate those battles. And I
Yeah.
think there's something beautiful about Greco in that the skill set and the things that you could do are so limited, right? Like it's obviously a technical game, but also just almost the most pure form of a fight that you can get in the sport of wrestling. You're standing and banging, and you could push, pull, underhook 2-on-1 and get to the body. And that's about it. It's who's
Yeah.
going to be tougher and who's willing to go in and smash their head and get two black eyes and you know
Yeah. Yeah,
enjoy that fight.
I'm much more of a grappler aspect, so
Uh-huh.
I much rather see I much rather get into the takedowns and riding stuff,
Uh-huh.
but I can appreciate somebody's interest for
Yep.
Greco. It's kind of like, I mean, again, it's like the boxing version of wrestling where you
Mhm.
just stand there and
Yep.
hand and club each other, and sometimes you get a guy out of position and you can arm throw him or
Mhm.
headlock him or
Yep.
toss him or something like that, but
Yep.
really it's a real hard hand fight.
Yeah. And then the last
But
thing I'll say about Greco too, just because I try to like I said, I'll talk to anybody that will listen about my thoughts on wrestling. Is that when you take, and this is from my experience as a wrestler, as well as my experience from a coach with the kids who have decided to go and wrestle Greco-Roman, is if you take a kid that's a pretty good wrestler in folk style and they decide to wrestle in the spring, I think Greco provides the greatest bang for your buck as far as improving as an overall wrestler. You could take a kid who's a really good folk style wrestler and we
yeah,
could drill, single legs and transition to leg laces and then gut wrenches and different types of things. And they are inevitably going to become a better wrestler and they're going to have a better single leg and they're going to understand positions a little bit better. But that wrestler probably already knows a single leg and probably already has a pretty good single leg. Whereas your average wrestler is in the middle of the ocean when it comes to locking horns and getting to a body lock outside of the run of the mill lat drop and a headlock. You could start
yeah,
really mess around with these positions. And then that gap between the average wrestler and them in those ties, sets them apart. And then guys don't want to bang up there with them. And then they can get to other offense. And, I've just seen wrestlers gain way more ground on the average wrestler by just spending some time wrestling Greco-Roman than a kid that decides to wrestle and just continues to wrestle freestyle. They might get better at certain things and their skill set in what they already have might get sharpened, but there's a whole other section that their level is essentially at zero that could improve very, very rapidly. You
yeah,
watch a guy like Bryce Andonian wrestling at the Division 1 level, and he's even a freestyler. He wrestled as Greco, but those upper body ties, guys like Austin Gomez, who has even been on record saying that he doesn't like wrestling Greco, but it's undeniable that Greco has influenced their style. And it's undeniable that guys don't want to be in there with them. And when they get into those positions, their rate of success is extremely high. And it's just fun.
Yeah.
It's fun and it's different and it's
Yeah.
enjoyable.
Well, whenever I think of stuff, I always think about like the development aspect and game theory. It's like we're just making games up.
Mm-hmm.
And so from a game perspective, I can see your point. Freestyle, if you put a lot of kids in freestyle that don't really know what they're doing, they get taken down, leg laced, and then it's over. It's like
Mm-hmm.
what was that a point? Was that even worth, the
Yeah.
drive here? I definitely think, one thing I want to do this off season is try to put on actual folk style series tournaments just so that
Mm-hmm.
there's more again more of the lower level kids to get involved in just folk style wrestling, just
Yep.
getting more matches and stuff. And I totally see your point as far as the I mean, again, the fact that you're doing Greco scenarios, I think that's a good start, just because again, competition, unless you're proficient in something, I don't really think competition is really that helpful anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the practice room, if you can make games up where you're just doing Greco, or you're just hand fighting with limited rules as far as what you can do attack wise, you'll get better at hand fighting, and then it will transition into, you know, uh, your overall wrestling repertoire.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's all good. I think everything has benefits, and yeah, I just know from that competition standpoint, I
Mm-hmm.
watched Joe Rao and I'm like, he shouldn't have been winning. If he wasn't winning, then
Yep.
he would have won that match. But
Yep.
yeah, so well, yeah, you got anything else? Otherwise, I'll let you go, and good catching up with you. I appreciate it, and good luck the rest of the season.
Yeah, man. That's all I got. I enjoyed, as always, getting on and talking shop, and keep me in mind for any week you're looking for somebody to talk to. And you can bet that I will be up to date with the current results and the current news, and will be willing to talk about anything, man.
Yeah, I'll catch up with you either before the state series starts, or right after. So we'll see how the schedules work out and stuff. And yeah, other than that, good luck, and I'll see you at Sycamore.
Awesome, man. I will see you this weekend.
See you.
Yep.